I have filed 41,912 cataloging reports in my career. I have classified the remnants of dead civilizations, the weapons caches of extinct empires, the broken hulls of ships whose builders stopped existing before my species learned to write. I am not easily unsettled by the objects I encounter. The Vreth Convocation did not appoint me senior archive curator of the outer silences because I prone to distress. I am telling you this so that what follows will be properly understood. The object had been in our archive for 847 years. Catalog reference Vreth OBG 7741D, subclassification, derelict hulk, contact origin non-functional, estimated mass 1.4 million tons, threat level nil. It had been entered by curator Vel Hath in the 402nd year of the Third Convocation, during a routine sweep of the Kelthara debris shell, a belt of dead rock and shattered moons in what we call the outer silences, 47 light-years past the edge of our catalog territory. Vel Hath had spent 11 minutes on the entry. I know this because the timestamp is embedded in the archive header, and I reviewed it myself the morning before we departed. 11 minutes. Something 1.4 million tons. I noted the brevity, but the object had been flagged for re-evaluations by 3 separate curators across the intervening centuries, and each had confirmed Vel Hath's original finding: inert, cooling, no power signature, no weapon emission, no threat. The Convocation maintains 4.44 billion active catalog entries. We cannot give equal time to each. The Kelthara shell was remote, the object was cold, and we had empires to document. My assignment was final closure. The Convocation was reorganizing its outer region catalog, and objects that had not been updated in more than 800 years were being either upgraded to active monitoring or closed permanently. OBJ 7741D had been reviewed, found inert, and was due for the closed permanent classification. I was to conduct a final high-resolution scan, firm nil threat status, append the closure notation, and file the report before returning to the inner archive stations. The survey vessel methodical accounting was mine for the transit. 14 crew, standard Convocation configuration, 1 deep scanner array, no armaments. We are catalogers. We do not require armaments. In 800 years of outer region survey work, no Vreth Convocation vessel has been lost to hostile action. This is not bravado. It is simply the nature of knowledge as power. We know where the dangerous things are, and we route around them. We dropped into real space at the edge of the Kelthara shell at the 32nd hour, local reckoning. I was on the observation deck when the debris field resolved. A broad scatter of tumbling rock, dark on one side, lit amber on the other by the distant dying star that anchors this system. Beautiful, in the cold way that dead places are beautiful. Nothing here had moved under its own power in geological time. The scanners began their sweep before I had settled into my station. First anomaly appeared at 41 minutes. My junior scanner, Vrethon, read it aloud in the flat voice we are trained to use for anomalous readings. Mass confirmation, Vreth OBJ 7741D, bearing 374 relative, range 18,000 kilometers. Mass reads correct at 1.4 million tons. Thermal signature elevated above previous cataloged baseline. She paused. Elevated by approximately 900%. I looked up from my notes. Define elevated, I said. Previous cataloged thermal baseline was 3 degrees above ambient debris field, consistent with residual internal decay heat from ancient power systems. She was very still. Current reading is 271 degrees above ambient. Localized to the interior of the hull, not the exterior plating. Internal heat, not ambient, not residual decay internal. I did not say anything for a moment. Pulled the archive entry up on my own screen and reviewed it. Inert, cooling, no power signature. 847 years of that notation, confirmed 4 times. I looked at the thermal profile Vrethon was reading, and I understood, calmly, that every one of those confirmations had been wrong in the same direction, and that the object had been warming, slowly, over centuries, towards some threshold we had not thought to look for because we had already decided it was dead. Full spectrum scan, I said. Everything we have. I want composition, internal structure, power source identification, if there is one, weapon array assessment, propulsion classification. Full report. The deep scanner takes 6 minutes to run a complete cycle on an object of that mass. I stood at my station and watched the preliminary numbers appear on my screen. And with each line of data, I felt the distance between what the archive said and what was in front of us grow wider. The hull composition was not rock. The archive had classified it as partially obscured by debris accretion, and this was accurate. It had been accumulating mineral deposits for 8 centuries. But beneath the accretion, the scanner was reading alloys we did not have in our materials database. Not the alloys of any species we had catalogued. Composition flags came back one after another with the same notation. No match found in Vreth Convocation Materials Archive. Please enter manual classification. I did not enter manual classification. I kept reading. The hull was intact. Not partially intact, structurally compromised but readable. Intact. Every seam sealed, every plate set. No structural failure anywhere along its length. For an object we had classified as a derelict for 847 years. In a debris field, the hull was in a condition I can only describe as deliberate, as though it had been built to survive this and had done so without difficulty. The weapon arrays were the next line of data. I will admit that I sat down. The object had weapon arrays, not the corroded mounting points of ancient weapons, long since decayed. Active weapon arrays, sealed in their housings, reading as pressurized, reading as charged. The scanner identified 19 distinct weapon signatures of types I could not classify. Several registered power levels that exceeded anything in our catalog. One of the signatures had no analog in any entry in 4 billion catalog records. The scanner kept trying to match it and kept returning the same error. Classification not possible. Insufficient reference data. Please contact Convocation Weapons Division. We do not have a weapons division. The Vreth Convocation is an archive. Catalog. We have never needed a weapons division because we have always known where the weapons were. Vreth on, I said, and my voice was correct. Flat, archival, professional, power source identification. She was quiet for longer than she should have been. The power source is active, she said. It is not residual. It is another pause. The scanner is reading it as functional, running. I don't have a classification for the source type. It reads like a contained reaction, but the energy density is. She stopped, started again. Senior Curator, the energy density is 14 times the output of a Convocation Class 7 deep scanner array, from a source the size of a room. I have a category. 14 times the output of our most powerful shipboard system, in something the size of a room, in a hull that had been in a debris field for 800 years. I heard the ship go quiet around me, not silent. The ventilation still moved, the scanner still hummed. But the crew had stopped moving. They were reading their own screens or watching mine. 15 people on a survey vessel in the outer silences. 47 light years from the nearest convocation station, and the object in front of us was waking up. Because that was what the data said. The thermal elevation was not residual, it was ascending. The power signature had been growing 4. The scanner extrapolated based on the gradient. Approximately 31 years, following some internal schedule, climbing toward an operational threshold. We had arrived, by the coincidence of a bureaucratic reorganization, 11 days before that threshold was reached. 11 days. In 847 years, we had visited this object 4 times, each time finding it cold and dead, and we had arrived 11 days before it became something else. Propulsion, I said. Engine signature is present. Vrethon's voice had lost its professional flatness. She was a good curator. She would find it again. Drive type is, I can't classify it, Senior Curator. It's not any drive we have in the catalog. The field geometry is wrong. It reads like it should be a fold drive, but the power requirements for fold at this mass are. She looked at me. It would take a Convocation fleet tender to move this hull to fold point. The signatures I'm reading say this ship does it alone. A fold drive. A ship of 1.4 million tons moving to fold point under its own power, on a drive we could not classify. I pulled up the original Velhath entry and looked at it for a long time. 11 minutes of survey work. The hull had been debris encrusted even then. Velhath had scanned the outer layer, found the rock and mineral accretion, found the cold exterior temperature, found no emissions, and filed it closed. He had not pushed the scanner deep enough to reach the interior. Why would he? The object was in a debris field. It was cold. It was old. The outer silences were full of dead things, and this was one more. Except it was not dead. It had never been dead. It had been— I searched for the correct word, and the word I found was sleeping. The 6th minute of the scan cycle completed and the full report assembled on my screen. And I read it from beginning to end without speaking. When I finished, I read it again. Then I looked up at the viewport and at the debris field and at the place, 18,000 kilometers distant, where the thermal signature was burning. All crew to stations, I said. Vreth on. A continuous scan feed to my station and flag any change in emission, thermal, or power readings in real time. I want a heading laid in for departure on my authorization. Do not execute without my order. Understood, she said. And then, Senior Curator, what is it? I did not know how to answer that, because the archive had no answer. In 847 years, we had filed it as a derelict hulk, pre-cont origin, non-functional, threat level nil. We had been wrong about every word after origin. I don't know, I said. That is the problem. I have spent my career in certainty. The Vreth convocation is certainty. It is the institutional belief that everything in the galaxy can be known, classified, ranked, and filed, and that the knowing makes us safe. We have 4.4 billion catalog entries. We have records of civilizations that ended before our planet had liquid water. We have classified weapons platforms from 7 distinct extinction-level conflicts that predated recorded Vreth history. We did this because we believe that the unknown is the only true danger, and that an archive large enough eliminates the unknown. I was watching the unknown warm itself up, 11 days ahead of schedule, and I was beginning to understand that our archive had a category error it had never considered. Not the absence of an entry, we had an entry. 847 years of it. The error was simpler and more terrible. We had looked at something we did not understand, and instead of marking it unknown, we had marked it safe, nil threat, because it was cold, because it was quiet, because it sat in a debris field and did not move and did not answer our scans with anything that matched our threat assessment criteria. We had defined threat as something we recognized, and what we did not recognize, we assumed was nothing. The thermal alarm sounded at the 44th hour. Not the gradual ascent thermal alert, a spike, a step change. The power readings, which had been climbing slowly for 31 years according to the extrapolation, jumped in the space of 40 seconds to a new baseline that was not gradual at all. The scanner screamed through 3 classification flags simultaneously, failed to categorize any of them, and defaulted to a solid amber alert across every station. I was at my station. I had not slept. Report, I said. Power signature has reached. Vrethon stopped. When she see he ape again, her voice was careful in the way that people are careful when they are afraid of what they are about to say. The power signature has reached operational threshold. All weapon systems are reading as active. The drive is reading as spun up. The hull is at full operational temperature across all sections. She looked at me. It's awake. Awake. Yes, that was the word. The scanner showed me what I will try to describe accurately, because accuracy is what I have. The object. I could no longer think of it as Vreth OBJ 7741D, could no longer make myself file it under that clinical designation, had been motionless for 800 years in the debris field. In the 48 seconds following the power threshold breach, it began to move. Not drift. Not the slow tumble of an object disturbed by collision or gravitational gradient. It moved with intention, which is a word I use precisely. The movement was deliberate, directed, and its initial vector was not random. The hull rotated on its long axis, a controlled rotation, driven by something, and the nose of it came around to point in a direction that was not the debris field. The direction it pointed was toward Vreth space. I sat very still. The deep scanner ran its next cycle, and the image it returned was no longer an ambiguous mass. With the debris accretion still clinging to its flanks, through the mineral deposits of 8 centuries, the shape of the hull was visible now that the hull was moving. It was a warship. The lines of it were unmistakable to anyone who had spent a career cataloging military platforms. The beam-to-length ratio was a warship's ratio. The weapon hardpoints, 19 of them, now confirmed active, were positioned as a warship positions its weapons, fore and aft and along the ventral and dorsal ridges in overlapping fields of fire. The drive section was aft, the command sections were forward, and between them were the long mid-sections I had seen in warships from 7 civilizations across 3,000 years of catalog work. None of those 7 civilizations had built anything like this. I ran the hull profile through the archive. Species identification, no match. Design lineage, no match. Construction date, no match. The scanner estimated the alloy age at between 700 and 900 years, consistent with the dormancy timeline. But the alloy type itself appeared in no archive entry predating this object. We had not seen it anywhere else because this was, as far as our catalog knew, the only ship ever built using these materials by this builder, which meant the builder was not in our catalog. I want you to understand what that means. The Vreth has been cataloging the galaxy for 3,000 years. We have entries for 412 spacefaring civilizations, living and extinct. We have recorded every weapon type, every hull design, every drive configuration known to operate in our region of the galaxy. We have entries for civilizations that burned out before the current galactic order existed. If a civilization built ships, we have those ships in the archive. Except we did not have this one, a spacefaring civilization that had built a ship of this class, 4 million tons, fold capable under its own power, with 19 active weapon systems of types that exceeded our classification range, had existed, had built this, had put it in the outer silences, and we had not known they existed. We had been to this object 4 times. We had filed it as nil threat, and now it was awake, and it was turning, and it was pointing at us. No, not at us. I looked at the heading again. At us and past us. Through us. The heading was Vreth inner space, yes, but the destination, the scanner's projection of the drive vector extended, past the star charts, was something specific. Something in Vreth inner space that this ship had apparently decided to navigate toward. Senior Curator. Vrethon's voice, very quiet. It's running a scan. I looked at my screen. The ship was scanning us. The emissions were unlike any scan type in the archive. Not a passive gravitational read, not an electromagnetic sweep, not any of the 14 scan CM types we had documented across 412 spacefaring civilizations. It passed through the hull of the methodical accounting the way I imagine something passes through a thought. Without asking permission, without announcing itself, reading everything, leaving no trace of having been there, except in the data that came back on our own sensor suite, showing us the shape of what had just touched us. It scanned us for 11 seconds. Then it lost interest in us entirely. I say this with clinical precision, because it is the most accurate description I have. The scan ended, the emission stopped, and the warship did not adjust its heading to account for our presence. We were within its weapons range. Well within. At 18,000 kilometers, we were essentially adjacent. And it looked at us, found us unimportant, and continued doing what it had been doing, which was orienting itself and preparing to move. The Convocation Threat Assessment Protocol requires that I assign a category. Opened the threat assessment form and looked at the fields. Known weapon type, no. Hostile action, no. Provoked engagement, no. Protocol is built for things that engage with you. And this thing had not engaged with us. It had noticed us the way you notice a rock you pass on a path. Briefly, without alarm. Without interest, and returned its attention to wherever it was going. I could not file it nil threat. I could not file it hostile active. Not file it anything the protocol recognized. The drive activated, not a gradual spool, not the slow acceleration of a ship working up to transit speed. The drive came on at what the scanner registered as full power. From 0 to operational output in a time interval, the scanner's resolution could not properly measure. Our instruments recorded it as instantaneous for practical purposes. And the warship began to accelerate. The acceleration profile the scanner measured was impossible. Not impossible in the colloquial sense, not impossible as in surprising or extraordinary. Impossible in the sense that the Newtonian mechanics governing our drive systems, our weapons, our ships, not produce an acceleration profile like this, without violating the physical constraints that make Vreth engineering possible. It was moving at a speed that, by the scanner's measurement, nothing that massive was supposed to be able to achieve in real space transit. and it was accelerating. The scanner kept running new measurements and kept returning numbers that the archive's physics models marked as erroneous. I watched the numbers appear, and I knew they were not erroneous. The ship was simply operating outside the engineering assumptions we had built our catalog on. It was passing us. The heading carried it past the methodical accounting at a range of 340 kilometers. Not close. In space. Not close enough to be a threat. Not close enough for me to believe it was deliberate. The warship passed us the way a mountain might pass you if you stood near enough to a cliff face that you could touch it. Enormous, unhurried, indifferent, operating on a scale and a schedule that had nothing to do with your presence. I stood at the viewport. The debris accretion was shedding as it accelerated. 800 years of accumulated mineral deposits streaming off the hull in a long, bright tail, catching the amber light of the dying star, and under the accretion the hull was dark alloy, with hull markings I could not read in a script we did not have in our language archive. The weapon ports were sealed. The running lights, I realized I was calling them that, because there were arrays of lights across the hull, in a pattern that read as running lights, to every instinct I had from a career looking at ships, on. Running lights. Like a ship with somewhere to go, announcing itself to traffic that might be present. We were the traffic. It passed us without acknowledgement, without further scan, without any action I could interpret as awareness of our specific presence beyond the 11-second scan that had already happened and already ended. The drive output at that range pressed against the hull of the methodical accounting, with a vibration I felt through the deck placing, a low frequency, that had no equivalent in anything our own ships produced. Vreth had one hand on her console and was watching the scanner read out with an expression I had not seen on a professional convocation surveyor. 4. Then it was past us, and receding, and the scanner tracked it as it moved away from the debris field at an acceleration that continued to turn impossible numbers. I watched until it folded. The fold was, I need to describe this accurately because I will be filing this report, and the report needs to be accurate. The fold a convocation vessel makes is a visible process. A containment field builds over 14 to 20 minutes. The fold geometry stabilizes. The ship moves into fold and is gone. The entire process is in the archive, documented across every spacefaring civilization we have encountered. Fold transit requires preparation time. It requires a stable field. It requires at this ship's mass more preparation time than anything in our experience. The iron compact, I am calling it this because something in me refused to keep calling it Vreth OBJ 7741D, refused to keep pretending that the number on a catalog entry was adequate to what had just passed, 340 kilometers from where I was standing. The iron compact folded at 11 minutes and 7 seconds from the moment its drive activated. Not 14 minutes, not 20, 11 minutes. At a mass that should have required 40 minimum by every engineering model we had. It folded and it was gone and the debris field was empty, and the amber light from the dying star fell on tumbling rocks that had no idea what had just woken up among them. I stood at the viewport for a long time. Vreth spoke first. She said, "Where is it going?" I pulled the projected heading. I ran it forward on the star charts, through Vreth inner space, through the catalogued systems, out the other side. The heading, extended to its logical conclusion, pointed toward a system we had in the archive. A system with one inhabited world, catalogued in the 203rd year of the third convocation, approximately 20 years after Velhath had filed Vreth OBJ 7741D as a derelict, a small world. A world our catalog had assessed as pre-spacefaring at the time of its cataloging. A world we had not revisited because pre-spacefaring worlds were low priority, and our catalog had 4 billion entries and we could not give equal time to each. I looked at that entry for a long time. I opened a new catalog entry for the iron compact. I filled in what I could. Hull composition, unknown alloys, no archive match. Drive type, fold capable, single unit, mass class unknown. Performance exceeds all documented parameters. Weapon systems, 19 active arrays, unclassified, power levels exceeding maximum Vreth archive entry. Builder, unknown spacefaring civilization, pre-archive, origin system unconfirmed. Dormancy period, approximately 800 years. Activation trigger, internal, schedule-based. external stimulus required. Came to the threat level field. I thought about Velhath, spent 11 minutes on this, and written nil threat. I thought about 3 subsequent curators who had confirmed it. I thought about the convocation, and its 4 billion entries, and the institutional certainty that what was catalogued was known, and what was known was safe. I thought about 11 seconds of being scanned and found unimportant. I thought about running lights. I wrote threat level, not assessed. Classification, insufficient data. Action recommended, convocation senior counsel review immediate. And then below it, I wrote something that is not standard archive language. I wrote it because I did not know what else to write, and because the form had no field for what I was trying to say. I wrote, we had it for 847 years. We looked at it 4 times. We thought we knew what it was because we had a number for it, and the number said nil. We were not wrong because we lacked data. We were wrong because we decided, before looking closely, that an old, cold, quiet thing in a debris field was not dangerous. We have 4.4 billion entries. We may have made this mistake before. We should look at what we have called nil. I filed the report. The methodical accounting broke orbit from the debris field and set a course for the inner archive stations. And I stood at the viewport for a long time watching the dying star's amber light fall on the empty place where the iron compact had been. And I thought about what it meant that a civilization had built that ship and put it in the outer silences to sleep for 800 years, and had built into it a clock that would wake it up, and had never told us they had done it, had never been in our archive at all, and had a world in the direction the ship was now heading. I thought about what they had built, and what it had done in 11 seconds and 11 minutes, and the running lights. I thought, they left the running lights on. 800 years, dormant in a debris field, they left the running lights on. So that whatever was present when it woke would know, this was never wreckage. This was always a ship. This was always on its way somewhere, we just didn't know where. We filed it closed. We were wrong. The archive is not complete. The archive has never been complete. We have been calling the unknown nil threat because we could not see it, and the unknown has been patient. I do not know what the iron compact is going toward in the inner systems, that small world we catalogued and set aside as pre-spacefaring and low priority. I do not know if it is the last of its kind or the first of many. I do not know what it will do when it arrives. I know what it did here. It looked at us for 11 seconds, found us unimportant, and moved on. That is the most frightening thing I have ever recorded in 41,912 reports. Not that it was dangerous. I do not know if it is dangerous. Not to us, not to the convocation. What I know is that it had 19 weapon systems charged, and the capacity to end the methodical accounting in the span of one of those impossible seconds, and it did not. Because we were not what it was here for. We were beside the point. The galaxy has things in it that we have not catalogued, and some of them have been waiting a very long time. And they have running lights, and they know exactly where they are going. File this report under whatever heading you choose. I have no recommendation for what heading is adequate. I have only the data. Threat level, not assessed. But I will say this, for whoever reads it, look at your nil threat entries. Look at the old ones. Look at the quiet, cold objects in the debris fields that nobody has visited in 800 years. Look at what you decided was nothing because it did not move. Not because they are all what the iron compact is, because we thought this one was nothing. For 847 years, and it had running lights the entire time.